This is the Code to Cash podcast.
Pricing is not a billing problem. Pricing is a code problem. Pricing is a product.
Price point is really the last thing that actually even matters.
You need to have the most atomic unit of your product, not your product.
Hi, and welcome back to the Code to Cash podcast. This is your host, Ajit. Today, we are joined by John Kim, who is the CEO of Sendbird. Sendbird powers 300 million plus people around the world for mobile conversations. It is the number one mobile conversation software. So, I would, having been in this space before, John, I would love to learn more from you both about the company monetization as well as how you were able to achieve all this. So welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. Really excited to be here.
Awesome. I generally like to start with the podcast by going a little bit into like the founder and the conception story. I've of course heard some of your other ones, but I would love to have you start with the genesis of the product idea. I know you've had some pivots along the way, and how you finally landed at the Sendbird idea.
Yeah, absolutely. So howdy folks, I'm John, founder CEO of Sendbird. Just to give you a little bit of my personal story and how we kind of ended up building this company. It all started maybe 15 years ago. I built my first company out of college. It was a Web 2.0 company back in the days. Mm-hmm. And then in 2008, financial crisis hit where no investor wanted to invest in Web 2.0 anymore. But because of my personal background as an engineer, I also used to work at a gaming company before. I was a professional gamer back in the days. Long story.
Awesome.
But because of my background, our investor came back and proposed, hey, actually, if you make games, we'll invest. So we pivoted into social gaming because I still wanted to help people connect with each other and form communities. And that's kind of the personal mission that I've been building also at Sendbird. So when we were building this social gaming company, obviously we have been building messaging and chat capabilities multiple times for our own games. We grew that company to about 5 million users in total. Eventually, the company got acquired. So we had a first good exit there.
Awesome.
And then started this company with the buddies from my first startup. So we've been working together for a good 13 plus years now. And we also started this company as a consumer product. This time we're building a social community or location-based community for moms, where you can connect with other moms in your area with similar age kids, set up play days, buy and sell used baby products, and then do Q&As and things like that. So obviously communication was a very important factor of the business. Yeah. We ran that community for about 2.5 years, got to about 250,000 users, but it was very clear that we're not going to be the next Facebook, right? The growth rate wasn't there, but we were keep iterating on our product. And it was around 2015 when the entire world was talking about messaging apps like WhatsApp, Kakao Talk, Telegram, like everything kind of took over the world. Mary Meeker, now at Bond Capital. Back then, she was at Morgan Stanley, and she was churning out an internet trends report every year.
Yeah, this was a very famous report, yeah.
Exactly. And back then, there was a huge coverage around messaging app, how messaging app took over the world. In any country, messaging app were the most frequently used, the longest average sessions. Maybe nowadays it's video apps, but back in the days, messaging app was the thing, the hottest thing. Conversational UI, chatbot. Nowadays, actually, chatbot makes more sense. But in 2016, 2015, chatbot was also a hot thing. So chat was like a set top of mind for everyone. And then we realized a lot of our users are on our own social network were chatting with each other. We didn't have like a DM or chat feature for our mom's app. So they're chatting through the comment section. So instead of answering the question in the Q&A, people are actually talking about their in-laws, their husbands, whatever, in the comment section. So we're like, okay, ladies, like, can you take your conversation, somewhere else? Then we realized, okay, we got to add a messaging or chat feature for our own application. But my co-founder and I were like, okay, we built chat like 4 times in our previous gaming company. Let's not do this again. So instead of building ourselves, we actually went out to the market as a buyer. So we tried out pretty much all the open sources available back then. And a lot of them were optimized for desktop experience, not for like mobile native applications like iOS or Android. So then we went to like SaaS products like Firebase, which is fantastic for rapid prototyping. But once you roll out into production, you quickly hit scalability issues. A lot of features are missing. So you have to build a lot of workarounds on top of it, which ended up becoming more of a spaghetti code. So we ended up scraping that out again. And then we had to, again, build a chat from ground up for the 5th time. And then we had this epiphany. It's like, because we were also talking to other founders and everyone was like thinking about messaging. How do we add messaging to increase retention, user engagement? So they're all kind of talking about the same thing. So we kind of had this idea. We did a hackathon, pulled it down to SDK, start kind of selling the site because we had like zero revenue on our mom's app for like 2.5 years.
Yep.
And we started selling this thing. And I've never actually done B2B in my life before. But this thing started to generate revenue from like day one. We had like
Okay.
first paying customer. I actually had no idea around how to price. So back then, in my mind, like because we were building everything ourselves, I'm like,
Yeah.
how much is the money that I would be willing to pay? It was like $49. So we quoted like $49 to a friend. It's like, oh, sounds easy. So they became our first company, first customer. And then we went to the next friend. It's like, oh, was it too cheap? Like $150?
Yeah.
And my friend's like, that's doable. So we had this like random pricing points and
Got
20
it.
paying customers. We applied to Y Combinator with that idea, got in, launched to the world in 2016 January, and fast forward good 7 years. Now, we're powering 300 million plus users on apps like DoorDash, PayPal, whatever customers
Amazing.
out there.
Amazing.
And we became the number one leading company in the
Amazing.
chat platform space.
I definitely have a lot of questions more to dive deeper on the pricing side. One question, actually, I used to work at a company in a similar adjacent space, I think, or maybe you could say the same space. It's a company called HelpShift. And they had a similar sort of product. They had an SDK, but somewhere along the line, they sort of lost their way. So I'm curious, how were you figuring out which segments to go after and sort of your product market fit?
Yeah, and product market fit, sometimes people think it's like a binary function. It's like you cross it and immediately it's the product market fit.
Yeah.
I do think there's a couple different ways to find product market fit. Our case was more of an evolution. It was like basically a process, and it was a journey to finding product market fit. And in retro, I think there was a couple moments in time where we realized, okay, we're onto something special. But just to kind of walk you through, because of our background in gaming, right? One of the very first use cases we wanted to solve for when we were building this chat infrastructure was we actually started with large scale group chat. Because like in gaming, if you think about lobby chat or clan guild chat, you usually have hundreds of people, if not thousands of people in the single chat room. So we actually designed our system in a way it's far more scalable, where you can have a lot of people in a single chat room. A lot of our competitors back then, and we were not the first player in the market. We were not the best funded. There were other much bigger and competitors out there who had much better logos and customers. So they started out with one-on-one chat, expanding into small group chat and scaling out to, let's say, 20 people, 100 people group chat, where we started out with 100, 1,000 people group chat from the beginning. So that allowed us to position ourselves differently in the market, which is very important, which we can tie into pricing as well, is how do you, as a startup, how do you find a differentiated value that even though you may not be the best funded, the biggest, you're still differentiated and you're the number one in the sub-segment of the market.
Yep.
So we're able to sell into verticals like gaming and social because our competitors were selling to different verticals. We were the only one who could serve gaming industry, right? So we were still starting to get initial traction from gaming and social community applications. And then that kind of gave us an edge, a wedge into the market. So we were able to differentiate and start selling to this segment early on. Then what happened after is a lot of social application or community application not only want group chats, but they also want one-on-one DMs. But if you think about group chat versus one-on-one, it requires a different feature set, right? Group chat, like read receipts, don't really matter if you have 1,000 people. You don't care whether 900 people read it or 500 people read it. It's about you just send it. Can other people see it? Can you moderate it? So the value proposition is slightly different. Versus like one-on-one, you want read receipts, typing indicators, be able to send rich media. So the feature set starts to become diverge a little bit. But because we already won these social logos, they want us to also provide one-on-one chat. So they basically pull the feature set. We were able to pull the product out of their needs by working, and we started to expand into that. And what ended up happening was we became positioned in the market as the most scalable chat infrastructure. Whereas other competitors were only good for one-on-one, but if customer wanted to build out later in a later stage, want to build more scalable chat, they had to pick us or them. And although we were more smaller, earlier stage, we were kind of positioning the market as a more scalable product. And that became our kind of lifelong strengths, competitive advantage over the years.
Makes sense. So you said that you started with like a $49 price tag, then you raised it to $150. And now I took a look at your website, you're pricing based on MAU. So I'm curious when you realized like, okay, MAU is the right metric, and curious what the inflection points were for your like pricing strategy itself.
Yeah, this is a funny story because you kind of realize how people are not necessarily thoughtful about pricing, and I say it with a very open and transparency. We went through a lot of different pricing exercises, and what's kind of fascinating is now today a lot of our competitors copy our pricing model and just try to offer a cheaper price. But I don't think they've necessarily understood why we price it this way, because it's not perfect. No pricing is ever perfect, right?
Yeah.
Maybe Apple's products are they? I mean, they're selling cloth wipers at a whatever price, right?
Yeah.
So no pricing is ever perfect. Now, with that said, back then we also started in a similar way. We looked at our market competitors, how are they priced? Some of them were charging by number of total users, some are MAU, some are different. Like they all had, some were message volume based, right? And then we kind of thought to ourselves, okay, a lot of competitors back then were charging by message volume. But because we're IP, and I'm sure they were doing it for the right reason, because they're probably comparing themselves against SMS pricing. And a lot of SMS, you have to pay the telcos, right? It's not by user, but it's by message volume. So I think the industry started out as a message-based volume model.
Yeah.
But we kind of saw that also as an opportunity, because in gaming or in other applications, because we're IP-based, our cost bases were lower than the telco SMS.
Yeah.
So we, instead of charging by message, we actually want to encourage our customers to
send
send more message to increase engagement and retention, therefore getting more value out of our product. So we actually said, you know what, we don't care about how many messages you send. We're going to charge you by users. Let your users send more messages, like utilize us more. So we changed the MAU. Then what ended up happening was, based on different use cases, the traffic patterns vary so much, like on-demand food delivery, ride-hailing. There's a peak time during like the commuting hours, right? This was pre-COVID. So a lot of commuting hours, a lot of around like lunchtime or dinner time, there's spikes in the pattern. And we had to rapidly scale up the servers. So it really came down to, in that moment, how many servers we have to spin up really became the dominant factor in determining our gross margin, the cost of servers, right? So how do we kind of solve for that? But we didn't want to go back to the message-based model, because we had a firm conviction that we want to encourage our customers to send more messages, not less. So instead of using MAU as a singular metric and not augmenting with message volume, we actually said, you know what has a high correlation to spinning up number of servers? We picked concurrent users because of our gaming background. Gaming companies know about their concurrent users. Other industries generally don't, but because of our background, we actually use concurrent users. Now, this has its own downsides, and it's kind of, again, interesting to see our competitors copy it and hope they realize what they're doing, because it's not perfect. But so we basically had these two kind of metrics. Two primary metrics was one number of MAU, the other was concurrent users, peak concurrent users. Based on that, we had a primary pricing layer, and then on top of that, we had like premium features where you can kind of add a la carte. Initially, we didn't have a lot of premium features, so adding a couple of premium features made a difference in pricing. But now we have so many premium features, we started to group them together. Because you can't have like 20 different editions of features and have 20 different pricing points. So we started with that. And then what ended up creating the pricing model we have today, initially it was all in my head, right? Because I was the only one who was selling, and my co-founder. So we were kind of having this conversation around what price to sell to customers. But once we started onboarding salespeople started quoting random numbers that just looked good, like $9.99, $5.99, just because like the number just rounds up or something like that. So, okay, as an engineer, like I could not live up with pricing being inconsistent. So we ended up, basically it was just me and my co-founder. We ended up creating this pricing calculator that had a quadratic formula. So basically it's a function that has asymptotic function based on unit price that had a cost basis in mind. And then you could put in any MAU, call it 49,356, and it would give you exact pricing point. So that it's an engineer pricing calculator. We ended up using that as a pricing calculator, which still to this date is a foundation. And then we built our more sophisticated pricing model on top of it, which made it far more easier to put out consistent pricing across all of our customers, treating all customers fairly, and also had a volume discount also baked into the function. And different payment periods or things like that also add extra discount layers in a very formulaic way.
Makes sense.
And that's kind of how we built it. And then I think the most critical point was, one is creating that repeatable and scalable pricing calculator. That was the most important thing. And then we can kind of talk about what are some of the principles that went into building a calculator. But I'll pause here.
I'm so fascinated with this because I won't go into what I'm doing, but one part of what I'm building is actually a calculator. And back in the day, I was responsible for maintaining this as a product, like almost a product that I had to update another company. So please tell me more. tell me more about like the process, like why was this so helpful? How were you even maintaining all of the costs in the calculator? I'm curious because I'm guessing there's like real-time information that you would have to add to it.
Yeah. So one was first having a calculator is much better than having no calculators,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Just having a table is worse because you'd always, as a startup, you'd always have edge cases. A customer asking for different combination of certain things,
Yeah,
and you can either say no, or we can actually say, based on your inputs, here's a pricing that's fair and consistent, right?
yeah.
You always want to be in the latter position to be customer friendly. But also, as a B2B SaaS company, you also have like a couple of fiduciary duties and principles that is important when you're building these out. One, a lot of founders don't think about the importance of this, but it's the importance of gross margin, right?
Yes.
You're not trying to sell hard disks. I think hard disks in general have 30% margins. So if you have a lower margin than that, you should be selling USB storages or hard disks. So what is the right gross margin, right? Infrastructure heavy companies will have somewhere between 50 to 70% gross margin. More B2B standard SaaS where you just sign up and charge by per seat. Like customer support solutions or some productivity solutions usually have somewhere between 75 to call it 95% gross margins.
Yeah,
We are a very infrastructure heavy company.
yeah.
So if we don't manage our pricing carefully, we could
Totally.
go sub 50% gross
Yeah.
margin very, very easily without realizing. So
Totally.
being able to put in instrumentation in place early on, so you can calculate the cost basis by region, by server instance, or by customer is super important. We didn't have that level of granularity in the early days. We had a total server cost, right? And by
Got it.
region,
Yeah.
but we didn't have by customer back then. Now we have a much better instrumentation. So
Yeah.
with that,
Okay.
so one is like making sure that you have a buffer margin of safety, as Warren Buffett says. You need the margin of safety to protect your gross margin.
Yeah.
And of course, salespeople will always say, "But we need more discount to sell." But so there has to be a healthy deal desk to make sure that your pricing calculator plus a deal desk to protect your gross margin to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Second is making it as intuitive for customers to understand as possible. And how do you do that? Is aligning your pricing axis to the customer value proposition, right? If customers seeing the value by number of seats, then you have to price it by seat, right? If customer value by users, then price it by user.
Yeah.
Now, our position is slightly difficult because some customers see our value as by MAU. Some people see it by only by event participants. Some people see it by message volume. So you have to pick your lane.
Yeah.
But which kind of leads to the third point is you have to pick your lane
Yeah.
to be as easy to understand as possible. Our peak concurrent connection, the other axis that we talked about, is a necessary evil to protect our gross margin.
Yeah.
But to be honest, if we could, we would remove it
Yeah.
to be better aligned to customer value proposition. But it will certainly hurt our margin and make us vulnerable, which ultimately will hurt back customers. Because
Right.
if we don't manage our company well, then
Right.
obviously it's the customers that also gets the damage too.
Got it.
So it's a necessary evil, but make it as intuitive and easy to understand as possible to customers. And again, which leads to a third point: do not offer multiple models to charge customers. Which means if you pick 3 different models, customers will always pick the cheapest model, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, as
Yeah.
customer, you have to assume customers are sophisticated and smart.
Yeah.
Not all customers may be, but just assume that you want to treat customers fairly and equitably.
Yeah.
Then you have to pick your lane because if you offer multiple models, market will always find the cheapest way to sell it, to buy it. And also some companies offer regionally different pricing, which I think in general is a mistake if you're like early on, because then customers are smart. Oh, we have office in different region. We'll buy through that region to get better pricing.
Yeah.
Now, if you're at scale of AWS and you have a strategic region to offer better pricing in a certain region because you have to increase the market share there, that's fine. But as a small company, you cannot afford the complexity that brings.
Right.
So make sure that you start with a globally uniform pricing. Now, by per customer, you may still have to negotiate because they buy in such a higher volume, or there might be a strategic logo that's going to create a huge marketing case study with you. So when you're kind of giving those discounts, make sure you're getting something in return, like marketing case study, testimonial, video recordings, or whatever those things are, right? Ability to use their logos and things like that. But making sure that you have a simple model, you're not wavering on different models. Of course, in reality, there could be some concessions, but try to stick to those principles as possible. And then the other thing I talked about earlier is how do you position in your market? Are you a premium product? Are you a differentiated offering? Then you can actually command premium prices because you have a differentiated value proposition. But if not, if you are in a highly competitive commoditized market, then you do have to look at the market. So generally, I recommend having product management team own the pricing, if not CPO, if not CEO. But if you are in a highly competitive market that's commoditized, like for example, like insurance, then your pricing should actually reflect more of the market competitiveness. Then sometimes the PMM function or product marketing function could own pricing because they should be the one that's more in tune with what's out there, right? So based on their competitive dynamics, I recommend picking which department to own pricing model. And then I guess lastly, a lot of people, and this is a controversial point. My general thought around B2B is like, don't offer too much free stuff unless it's very essential to the core product. And also when you're offering free stuff, don't offer it indefinitely with unlimited cap. Some people say use all you want, unlimited for whatever tier. That more often than not hurts the company in the wrong way, like gross margin. Especially when you take away from the market, customers are super pissed off. So manage the expectation that everything is somewhat capped in free tiers, so that when you do make changes, customers are not surprised.
Makes sense. Definitely two areas where I'd like to double click on more. One is the sales motion. So it's B2B, but were you always you have a mix of PLG and outbound sales, and or were you mostly outbound sales before and then you move more towards PLG?
Yeah. So we had a self-service model when we first launched, but we realized that in order for us to find product market fit, we had to actually talk to customers more. Going back to YC mantra, you do two things, right? Build product or talk to customers. And by talking to customer, we realized we have to make a lot of fine tuning. But if you have a set pricing out there on a pricing page, it's a lot harder to make those changes. The different feature configuration, different pricing points. So we actually took down self-service. That's what we want to do, find product market fit through sales. And then we did that. So we switched to a sales-driven model, but still a lot of our opportunities still to this day is coming inbound. 80% plus our revenue do come from inbound. So we've been building the inbound engine and maintaining the inbound engine to fuel our growth. We do occasionally do outbound for sure, but it's very driven by inbound. And once we've gotten to a point where we know our cost factors, we know the value proposition, we went back to our roots and turned on the self-service pricing model, I believe a couple of years ago, 2021. And then we started rebuilding that PLG motion a little bit. So yeah, now it's certainly a mix.
Got it. All right. So second area that I'd like to probe in to your example, as well as what's happening in the market today. So gross margin. Do you find that in your example, you were mentioning as messaging seasonality changes or their peak times, people use more and then that suddenly impacts your server consumption? Is that like fundamentally like a high, like slightly higher in terms of cost than, let's say, a WYSIWYG enterprise app that may not have that problem? Like, is that the driver of the cost pressure?
Certainly that, but actually we did a really good exercise internally at the beginning of the year, or probably like last year. We started cost optimization exercise simultaneously. So engineering put it as a priority to optimize our servers, understand the traffic patterns, make it more dynamic. So we were able to save considerable costs in server gross margin. So although our user traffic like literally doubled, we were able to increase our gross margin during the same time, which is fantastic. So our engineering team did a phenomenal job of scaling it, increasing the efficiency per server, more throughputs, and also doing a ton of optimization around databases. And so we were able to increase our gross margin further, despite the traffic was rapidly increasing. Now, obviously, like we can continue to squeeze a dry towel, right? But I think having the priority and focus really helped us build a strong, I guess, a foundation for cost optimization.
Makes sense.
But certainly has been a priority for us.
Makes sense. And now coming to the question on, I'll come back to more questions on Sendbird, but I really want to ask you this. So with the advent of these generative AI use cases, as well as there's new middleware that's existing before, like if you use the OpenAI API, for example, or some other model API, that has its cost. But also on the value side, it's a little probabilistic when a user is going to find value from these applications, like how many iterations it's going to take. What do you think is now going to companies would need from a cost or values? Like how do they start to think about when they add this layer on top of their existing products, or they go to market from scratch? What new challenges are they going to face?
Yeah. Going back to my principles earlier, right? OpenAI will have their own pricing access.
Yeah.
Now, generally if you look at a lot of AI companies in general have a bad gross margin
Yeah.
because it's so infrastructure heavy. So surprisingly, a lot of AI companies have to deal with low gross margin plus a lot of professional services. Now,
Yeah.
OpenAI hopefully can solve that with this beautiful large language model, but they will have their own pricing model, which is based on tokens, right? Now, customers, if you are the B2B company that's going to leverage things like OpenAI, will have to still sell their own value proposition to their customer, or their customer may not care about OpenAI, how they charge by tokens, right? They will still care about whatever value they're getting. So it could be by seat, could be by message volume, could be by something else, data consumption. So then company in the middle who's building this B2B SaaS product now have to figure out how to manage their AI cost while making sure that they can still sell to their customers that's intuitive for customers. So there's a misalignment in the pricing model.
Yeah.
So they have to really put in a lot of instrumentation and rate limiting to make sure that they can still protect their gross margin while still using AI, because the cost can get out of hand very, very quickly because they don't have a lot of control over the pricing model of OpenAI, nor how customers can use their product. So putting in a very good safeguard around rate limiting and understanding the traffic pattern so that they can have a very good predictability around the cost basis based on the user's whatever consumption model. And that's going to be a huge challenge. I'm sure, because again, OpenAI had to serve vast different amount of different industries. There'll be so many different B2B startups that leverage OpenAI. So OpenAI is not going to offer 5 different pricing models. Well, right. They'll also probably offer 1 or 2 at most. So then how do you put in the right instrumentation and monitoring system in place to make sure that you can still build a financially healthy company? That's going to be a real challenge.
Totally. That's what I was sort of thinking, that it's not the same as SaaS. When SaaS came about, things were pretty simple and you could still predict gross margins. But in the AI landscape, you could run out of funding, or you could start to leak a lot of money really fast before your path to product market fit shortens. Right? It's more of a tightrope than it was before.
Yeah, but I appreciate that OpenAI is working very hard to lower the cost. It's almost like Amazon's method. Like more volume they have, they will continue to lower the cost, and they are doing that, right? So in the future, because of competitive dynamics between like Microsoft, OpenAI, Google, the cost will get lower. The AI layer will get commoditized to a certain extent. Now, when I say commoditized, it's not going to be like as easy as like email, but because it's still a very valuable and difficult technology to build. But because of the competitive nature and everybody's working so hard on it, the pricing will continue to get lower. So hopefully more and more companies will be able to benefit and leverage the AI going forward. So I think ultimately the consumers and the businesses, the customers will benefit from this AI revolution in the long run. But in the short term, while we go through this transition of everyone trying to figure out how to leverage AI and how to create the right business model for it, there will be a lot of companies that have negative margins for sure. So it'll be an interesting challenge.
Makes sense. Okay, pivoting a little bit into the systems discussion. So I come from B2B SaaS background, B2B enterprise SaaS. People used to do things pretty much by hand, manually. You would sign a contract, say, 100 licenses. There's no monitoring mechanism, but you've always been in the usage-based space. So what systems did you have to build on the engineering side? There's a lot on the product side, on the billing side, to really make sure that this machine works. I'm curious how you thought through that, and what did you have to build to solve for it?
Yeah, one of the benefit of having built a gaming company before is gaming companies are very metrics driven, right? Especially social gaming, because average revenue per user is like so thin. You have to understand the CAC, ARPU, payback period, all those things very, very carefully. And B2B SaaS is also about measuring metrics. While it's not perfect, I think we initially even started out with an internal dashboard where we were measuring all the usage metrics pretty much in real time. And then also marrying that with the pricing calculator. So in the dashboard internally, you know exactly how much customers are paying, what is their traffic pattern on a daily basis, on a weekly, monthly pattern. And then now we also have a data warehouse where we have all this data being aggregated to a single place where you can actually analyze different data patterns. So nowadays we have a PM who can go in and understand the exact pricing and cost implication by customer, by gross margin, calculate the server gross margin. On top of that, we have like CSM salaries and other things that also goes into the gross margin calculation, right? So we first start with the cost server margin, and then layer in other factors to understand the gross margin per customer. And then we also monitor the top 20, top 50 customers and what their gross margins usually look like. Because in any kind of businesses, right, it's a priority distribution, right? Whatever top 20% of customers will drive 80% of traffic and 80% of revenue. We have an even more, I guess, a distributed or more extreme case of that distribution where
Yeah.
top 10% of customers drive like 90% of
Yeah.
traffic.
Yeah.
So how do we carefully optimize and monitor their traffic patterns? And all the optimization we do for larger customers benefit the entire rest of the customers. And we can kind of monitor our server gross margins and the effect as we roll out to more regions. We can monitor those pretty much in real time.
Makes
so
sense.
we have a team that dedicated on monitoring and optimizing those servers.
What about on the other side? So this is more on the product usage, you're measuring margin, you're able to look at regions and products.
Yeah.
At some point the customer has to get an invoice and it has to be accurate. And ideally you don't want to keep fighting about like how much they consume. So I'm curious what you have to build. So like I'm guessing you have to tell them this is how much you used. You have to build billings, some billing approach. And I'm curious, is this technology easy to buy off the shelf, or all of it does it have to be built in-house?
I wish we could have bought a solution, but back then our pricing model was evolving so quickly.
Yeah.
Because the pricing and packaging, the configuration, the rapid rollout of new feature, it was just there weren't enough systems or software out there back then to have the level of complexity that we were building. So we evaluated a couple of solutions out there, but we ended up just sticking to our own solution because of the complexity and the rate of iteration and the changes we're making. Similarly, right, if you're rapidly prototyping a dashboard, it's far easier to do it on spreadsheet. Once you have a spreadsheet that works, that you're going to make marginal improvements over time, then you can move off to some like dashboard like Looker or something, because it's not more stable. But when you're rapidly changing a lot of things, it's more beneficial to have a system's more flexible and highly configurable, right? So we started with our internal solution. So to this day, we use it internally. Now our customers can go into their dashboard and see how much they use on a daily basis. So they can self-monitor themselves as well. And then our CSM team also has an internal dashboard where they can look how much customer has contracted, how much they're using over time in real time, and we can look at it on a daily, weekly, monthly basis too. So there is a system that can do that, but we invested in it really early on. Now, the system wasn't perfect back then, and it's not perfect now. Yeah. But it's going to be very, very important because customer never likes to be billed wrongly, right? Yeah, makes sense. Okay. One debate I would love for your input on. So we've been having in the monetization community debate on org structure. There are some organizations have like this head of monetization role. Many organizations have like a head of growth role. Other organizations just has a chief product officer. What in this setting, like in your company setting, or perhaps in the upcoming, the AI sort of companies that are going to grow, how do you see the responsibilities for monetization shift? Like who should own this? Yeah. What sort of skill sets would you ideally want to staff this team with? Yeah, I kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier, but also depends on the scale of the company. If you're early on, like it's just probably CEO, CTO, somebody does it, right? Yeah. But as you kind of go beyond, let's say 10 million, 50 million AR, then pricing actually becomes such a huge factor. Because if you just have a 5%, 10% optimization in pricing, that's a material difference. Could be millions of dollars worth for your company. But somewhere along the way from, let's say, call it Series A to Series B, again, based on your competitive dynamics, I generally, if your product's like in a differentiated market, you have a unique value proposition, then I actually recommend having, let's say, product manager, or head of product, or even the CEO himself or herself own the pricing as long as they possibly can. But if you're in a market that's highly competitive, very easily commoditized, then actually have that in the, let's say, a marketing function. So the pricing is more reflective of what's out there in the market. And then really figure out how to, because the differentiation will then come from like brand and positioning rather than your own product's unique differentiation. So it really depends on what is your core strength and what is the competitive dynamics of the market. I think that's kind of the big pillar. Now, after that, once you reach a certain scale, you can call it 50 million, 100 million, it does make sense to consider other options. Having a pricing specialist, having revenue operations and other departments form a joint task force to understand pricing and you to iterate and review on the gross margin, the pricing factors, and all the continuous process of getting feedback from the market, win-loss analysis, and having all this feedback back into your pricing organization and having a pricing specialist own that. I still not recommend it pricing put into, let's say, organizations like finance, because it has to be more directly connected to either the product or the market or slash customers, right? So having some form of an oversight or decision-making power ultimately on the go-to-market function or product function, but having a specialized pricing organization would make sense if you reach that scale. And also consider bringing on other experts like Simon Kutscher or other pricing experts who cost anywhere from 6 figures to even 7 figures. But let's say you spend $500,000 on pricing exercise that would get you $3 million in net new ARR in the coming year. It's worth it, right? So I do think it's worth considering that. And thankfully, a lot of companies who went through this pricing exercise actually share on their blogs, like what is the exercise they went through. Like I think 5Trend share their model going from subscription-based to consumption-based model. So learn from other best practices too. And especially thankfully in the tech community, a lot of people do pay forward. Like they share their mistakes and learnings. If you just like reach out to them and ask to hop on a call, they'll share those insights too. And also like other VCs like Andreessen Horowitz, and people share their on their podcast too, share their knowledge about pricing changes. So try to consume and educate yourself as much as possible. That's a long-winded answer, but
no, totally, 100% makes sense. All right, so that's most of my questions more on the topic of monetization, but I would love to sort of end with more of your vision, right? Like, what are you doing next at Sendbird? What would you like to, end as a leave behind for the listeners, and what should they look forward to?
Yeah. So Sendbird, our mission is to build connections in a digital world. Because we started this company, yes, one was to build our own messaging product. But if you think about the evolution of any technology, right, whether it be telecommunication, dial-up modems, one of the very first use cases that people built was being able to communicate with each other, right? The online communities, the messengers, ICQ, if you remember those days. So like messaging and communication is not like a novel technology. It was just accelerated dramatically because of mobile devices. Before, you had to sit in front of a computer, but now everyone's have a handheld computer called smartphones. So because of that, the messaging and conversations really exploded around the world. And that's why we exist. It's why we were able to grow this company. And our vision is to continue to serve more people's conversation behind the scenes. We don't have to be known. We just want to help as many businesses as possible to harness the superpower of digital communications as easily as possible. Today, we serve a mere 300 million users on a monthly basis. Collectively, billions of people have conversations through our platform. We want to be able to serve 1 billion people every single day. It means pretty much 5 billion mobile internet users will be communicating through our platform on a monthly basis. So we want to power those critical conversations. On top of that, how our company is evolving, we started out powering what we call the user-to-user communication. 2 people chatting on a dating app, doctor talking to a patient on telehealth, right? But now we have evolved to a point where our customers, businesses are sending what we call the branded-to-user communication, like marketing messages, transactional messages, customer support. We're seeing more and more of our customers doing that. So we want to become this ultimate conversational platform where if you want to enable any kind of customer conversations on your business, we want to be the de facto standard of the industry. So we're building our solutions towards that with a little bit of hint of AI to facilitate that even further. But we want to be that household name. If you want to build a business, build a digital business, you come to us and we'll be the best solution for you to enable those customer conversations.
Awesome. The road to 1 billion people. I'm looking forward to that. Maybe we can do another podcast when you reach that. But thank you so much, John. It was awesome to chat all things monetization. Learned a lot. Appreciate it.
Yep. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. So so I'll cut this part, but I'll just stay on until the thing. Just let me stop recording.